remember. I don't remember an email, but it's okay. All right. Welcome to the Norfolk Advisory Board meeting for October 6th. We will be discussing zoning and planning as it pertains to the warrant. And as always, this meeting is held via Zoom due to the COVID-19 pandemic as allowed by Massachusetts law. All right. So with that said, I guess, Rich, do you want to get started or?
Sure.
Okay.
You want to start with the zoning, or we could, so Barry's with me this evening. We could touch on stormwater first if that's okay. He's not really involved with the zoning per se. Is that okay to start there?
Yeah, that's totally fine.
Okay. So good evening.
Just because I'm following along with the articles, what article number are you on that you're starting with?
Rich, I think it's 13. I think we're the last one, the stormwater.
Is it 13?
Okay.
All right.
Yep, Article 13. Okay.
Okay.
Thank you, Erica.
Great. So I will start off by saying the bylaw that's before you, that's going to town meeting, is an existing general bylaw for the town dealing with stormwater, and the proposed changes that are before you is an outcome from our MS4 permit, which is a stormwater management permit that comes down from the Environmental Protection Agency down to local communities, cities and towns. As part of the MS4 permit, there are different stormwater tasks that need to be done. Some are mapping related. You're probably aware of some of those. Some are compliance checks related. Some are bylaw related. In this particular one, it's changes that need to be made to our bylaw. Now, first off, we're actually renaming it to call it stormwater management, which in fact is actually what it deals with. And the changes that are presented for you really stem from, well, in part, because we're in the Charles River watershed. So some of the stormwater requirements as far as pollution removal as it relates to phosphorus has been increased. We had done this before. It is in our existing bylaw, but we're having up the increases because that is one stormwater contaminant that needs to be addressed within the Charles watershed. This bylaw really affects, I'll call it subdivision development, commercial development. It's not scaled down to individual homeowners level. So those are in terms of where it would be applicable to, where it's applied. Some of the things that are in here are cleaning up some of the terms that are identified within the bylaw. This bylaw, comparably speaking to other cities and towns around us, these are really minor changes in the scheme of things, because Norfolk was really one of the pioneers and forefront dealing with stormwater management decades ago, and had already put in a very extensive stormwater management bylaw. So they were way ahead of the curve in terms of dealing with stormwater management compared to other communities. So for example, just to give you a flavor of it, in Norfolk, when a development is put in, stormwater is evaluated in terms of the site, what comes on and off that site before development, and then compare it to post-development. So post-development has to match pre-development. And that is essentially everything that drops on that site has to be retained on site, which is one of the things that, again, we're way out in terms of other communities. That's something, if if you look at stormwater, not that you may or may not, but rate, the rate at which the stormwater comes off is what's been regulated. But we in Norfolk actually do rate and volume. So it's a more comprehensive. So essentially, when you have development that goes in, there really aren't issues that abutters really need to be concerned about as it relates to stormwater, because the systems in Norfolk are designed to retain it all on site. So that's a big kudos to Norfolk in that regard. And that being the case, we're much further ahead. So what's being proposed is really some minor changes to make sure we're compliant with our MS4 permit. We need to adopt these changes in 2021. If we don't adopt the changes, we run the risk of being out of compliance with our MS4 permit, whereby we could be subject to fines from the EPA as they conduct audits of various communities. I think that it is, as you know, a general bylaw, so it's just a majority vote. The planning board reviewed the bylaw with the changes back in August, recommended this to be placed on the warrant for acceptance in the fall. The regulatory board is the planning board in terms of the permitting aspect of it, who oversees it, implements it, but it is in collaboration with Department of Public Works. So both Barry and Blair and we all collaborate together working on stormwater. There are some things that we work together on that's not directly tied to development projects, but so this is part of the overall comprehensive stormwater bylaw they have for development, though. I'll pause and open up to any questions people might have.
It was probably sent, but I don't see a copy of the actual verbiage changing in the bylaw. Is that available?
Did you not get a copy of the warrant?
Well, if the warrant is it's not what
the warrant shows is just some text about referencing a website, the town's website. I was going to ask the same question. Is this the text of the bylaw or?
No, actually, that's not even.
Rich, it just says section 7, post-construction stormwater of new developments and redevelopments as included in the document entitled Name of Document, which is available on the town's website for inspection or take any action in relation thereto. We need to make sure that we can't say at the town meeting that to go to the website. We need to have a printout of that so that people can see it.
Yeah,
that's the version of the warrant that we got this week, Rich, or that's on for this meeting. So
that's on the screen that we're looking at right now.
Yeah.
If you want, I apologize. I thought, all right.
I mean, it doesn't, it only matters because we like to know what we're voting yes for, but apparently we don't really have much choice because we have to do it. It's perfunctory in the sense that we have to vote yes because it has to be done to bring us up to compliance with the federal law. But at the same time, we still like to know what we're agreeing to.
Yeah, absolutely. So, do you have another meeting coming up before that you'll be?
We do. We have CPC next week, and then we're voting after that.
Okay. So I think, in fairness to the advisory board, why don't I apologize. I thought this was sent to you so you would actually see what we're talking about. I hope that's not the case with the zoning. Do you have that or no?
This is all we have is this warrant.
Oh, Lord. I thought the warrant had the, okay. All right. Well, so I think in fairness to you as a body, what I can do is, next Wednesday. So I got conservation meeting. You want to, let's see. All right. So you have 12, that is the zoning bylaw as it relates to the zoning for the signs.
Yeah, we've got that.
Do you have the floodplain one?
Oh. What number is that?
No, you don't have that.
Number 11?
Yeah. What?
No, it's just,
Yeah.
it's same, it's basically the same verbiage as the one for 13,
Okay.
which is available on the town's website.
What time? Let me do this.
Hold on. I've got an email from Betsy from a couple of weeks ago that says Town of Norfolk Planning Board. This is the sign regulations. See if Norfolk will amend section D5 floodplain wetlands. I mean, it doesn't have anything attached to it, but it's just letting me know that it's happening. There's no documents attached. So all it says is the articles are as follows: to see if the town of Norfolk will vote to amend section F9 sign regulations of amending zoning bylaws by adding an exemption to F9A2 in bold print or take any action relative to. And then number 2 is to see if the town of Norfolk will vote to amend section D5 floodplain wetlands protection district by deleting the strike through language and adding the new language in bold print, et cetera. But that's all that's attached. There is nothing else in the email. So that's the only thing that I've gotten.
All right. So what I could do, if you allow me to screen share, I can
Yes, please.
share it with you so you can at least see what we're talking about.
And then the last thing that I got from you was the master plan training session. So that's all I've gotten.
Okay. All right. So I can screen share with you.
Should be able to.
I just gave permission for others to share, so you should be able to put it up.
All right. Well, we actually can do. I'll pull up the stormwater bylaw too, so you can at least.
Rich, you might want to, I don't know if you have the comparison, the synopsis that Beta put together. That's short and sweet. It shows what we had, what's being changed, instead of having to go through the whole bylaw. Yeah, it's right on top of your list.
Yeah, we can. Yeah, we can go through this.
So I think this is pretty concise. It kind of shows, what we already had existing that we don't need to change, what we're adding to the bylaw to strengthen it. It's quick and easy read, straight to the point.
Yeah, I think so. But instead of having everybody read it right now, why don't I'll email this to you so you can read it so you're prepared. And then also I will send the stormwater bylaw to you as well to take a look at so you can see what I was talking about. And then I'll switch over to the zoning bylaw because the planning board has the hearing next Tuesday evening. So you probably would want to wait to that outcome anyways, I would think, right? Usually you kind of, so I can at least go through it with you so you can see what will be discussed. Let's see, so where's we'll do the sign one. What the heck is it?
While you're looking, can I ask who's Beta, Barry?
Beta was the engineering firm that we hired to help us with our MS4 compliance.
Thank you.
So they're with us. They've been with us for 3 years. We have another 2 years of working with them to try to get us up to snuff.
Thank you. Cool.
All right. So I'll shift gears and talk to you about the floodplain bylaw. That there's a little bit more substance to that one. Then we could talk about the sign bylaw one after that. As I intro this to it's somewhat similar in terms of the stormwater, bylaw, the FEMA has across the country pushed out to towns, cities, counties, and so forth that regulates activities within the floodplain to adopt and make changes to floodplain bylaws. So if you don't have floodplain bylaws, you need to adopt floodplain bylaws. If you have floodplain bylaws in your community, you need to make some changes in accordance with what they're calling as model standards that they're putting forward. In the state of Massachusetts, the Department of Conservation and Recreation oversees the floodplain program for the state at the state level, and they put together a model bylaw. And what was taking place is our zoning bylaw was sent to them amongst other communities throughout the state to review them in comparison to what the model bylaw has. This thing is going to drive me nuts. Is that there? Okay. To see the heck? How'd that go?
You clicked on the link instead of exiting out of it.
No, sorry.
So just go back up to that. Yeah.
Damn. Well, that's great. Try this again here. Oh boy. Technology's batting zero for me. Well, as I'm playing, I'll try to do two things at once. So what we had done, as I mentioned, we sent our bylaw off to Department of Right. What's it doing on my computer here? I'm going to stop sharing, then I'll come back in a second here. Just so I can. My apologies. What's going on? Go back to share. Okay. All right. As I was mentioning, so we had two really options to consider as it related to changes to the floodplain bylaw, which I discussed with the planning board over the summer, and then in August they made a final decision, which was to put forward to town meeting a blended bylaw, which one option was to take and delete in its entirety our existing floodplain bylaw and then replace it with a model bylaw. And I discussed with the planning board that while that might be a good option, I think maybe a better option would be to take, which I call the blended version, which you can see, which has the cut, it has strike through and bold language that's being added. And so what we've done is, on the first page that's on the screen, if you look in terms of the purpose section of our floodplain bylaw, everything that's 1 through 5 there, those are within the existing bylaw that the folks at DCR thought were very good purpose reasons for the floodplain. But then as part of the model bylaw that they sent out to the communities, these other purpose reasons were put in there. And it's all stems from the fact that obviously we know climate change is occurring and there's a lot more flooding that's going on and storm damage related to it. So they have pushed this out in terms of FEMA, that they want, like I said, communities to adopt model regulations. And there is this is phase 1 of the changes, which would be the bylaw changes. There is going to be coming forward changes to the floodplain map. And I'll get I'll go a little bit further into this. You'll see I do reference a new floodplain bylaw date from FEMA. That occurred because there was a change to one Norfolk County community. So all the FEMA maps for Norfolk County changed. So we're referencing that new date, which is a 2021 date, but our floodplain boundaries has not changed as of yet. But as part of the compliance with the FEMA program, we need to change the date. Another thing you see in here, we're trying to create a little bit more clarity in terms of floodplain protection districts, and we took out wetland. We have a watershed protection zoning bylaw already. We also have a general wetlands bylaw, so we are by no means taking away anything as we relate to wetland protection. But this change, I think, is really intended to kind of clarify this. This bylaw here deals with the floodplain. I'll scroll down to this is unfortunately, I guess you want to call it, one of the newer provisions from the model bylaw. We have to develop a permit program. So if somebody is within the floodplain, if they want to put in a fence, a shed, storage facilities, they have to get a permit from the town. I mean, quite frankly, that's going to be pretty challenging for us because some of those things don't even require permits. Even paving of a driveway within the floodplain is something. So we're going to have to develop a permit program for them. It's not something we have a choice. We need to do this because this is part of the bundled package in dealing with changes to the floodplain. But I will tell you, we've discussed this internally, and this is going to be tricky for us to do because, like I said, somebody paves the driveway. If it's jurisdictional to the conservation, they may file. But some properties are in the floodplain, but not necessarily jurisdictional to conservation. So we may not know if somebody's paving a driveway. The challenge is,
which is one of the things I know we haven't talked about this, but it would trigger on the DPW side of things because they'd have to get a curb cut permit. So that's something we could discuss later on to see how we could help you out tracking that.
That certainly could help provide.
Just curiosity, what if this doesn't pass?
Good question. I didn't get to that. I can jump to it now to let you know.
Only because I think that there's going to be people in town who have an issue with passing this.
Absolutely. So if we do not pass these changes, then FEMA will take the town of Norfolk out of the National Flood Insurance Program. So anybody who participates through the flood insurance program, they won't be in it.
How much of the town of Norfolk does this affect? How much of Norfolk is in a flood zone?
I can show you here. My computer's a little bit slow, but I'll show you on the map. But I will tell you, it also stems from, it's not just limited to people within the floodplain. So if there's, we're knock on wood, pretty fortunate here in Norfolk, but if there's flood damage and we're trying to recover money from FEMA that we have to deal with, we may not get reimbursement funding for that. It's a little bit slow, but I'm just panning out so you can see. So this, you see the, like this area here.
I mean, if I had to guess, I'd say, 35, 40%. You think about Stop River, the bodies of water we have in town. It's more isolated around those bodies of water. So it's not a huge percentage of the overall town.
Right, but you're already talking about a town where it's ridiculously hard to get anything done. from a home improvement building, permitting standpoint with things like pools and sheds and building. And now you're saying that anyone who lives in a flood zone is going to have to adhere to that? Or is it going to be is it going to be a perfunctory approval of a permit? They just have to apply for it, or you're actually going to deny them permits if they live in a flood zone?
No. So there's already, I don't want to, and maybe this was where we put this in the body of the bylaw, but there is already existing. So if you have an existing house that's in the floodplain, there is a limitation how much you can expand it. So you're not, yeah, I agree. There's another regulatory scheme over top of it, but at the same time, let me go back up so I can show you. Let's see. Okay. So.
Rich, this is Kristen. I'm a little concerned that your framing of this entire thing has been negative. And I'm wondering if you can talk a bit about the actual purpose of this from the federal government perspective as to why this is being asked of people who would be, using FEMA money.
That's a fair critique. I wasn't.
I can tell you don't like it, but there has to be a reason.
No.
So,
no. So the only, like I said to you, I mean, my negative is really in terms of that permitting when it comes to paving driveways, fences, and sheds, because there's some of those things that aren't natural triggers for us.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Barry makes a fair point. Okay, somebody might apply for a curb cut permit, but somebody might have a gravel driveway and just repave it. They might go from gravel to pavement. So that might be a little bit tricky. No, it's really to protect the public, us as a whole, to start to, whether you like it or not, is to regulate things so we don't have development within the floodplain, and we have floods and we have storms that create damage, then we're not repeatedly paying the price for development where it's prone to flooding. So that's the big picture. The positive thing is to try to get development out of the floodplain areas, so you're not, we're not
building in places that are prone to issues in the first place. Right.
You really shouldn't be building in those areas because they are flooding. They are prone to flooding. So that's the positive aspect of it. The other aspect is, if building gets done, it needs to be made sure it's done to meet,
flooding standards, things like that.
Flood standards, right? Exactly. We make sure that if it's a structure, it can free flow, and so there are a lot of positives to it. So I'm just sorry to be negative. Just really, like I said, it's really more. I'm probably negative because everybody passed the ball around in this one. Nobody wanted to.
I mean, it's so exciting. I can't imagine why that got passed around so much.
So the administration of the floodplain is going to be handled by.
It's complicated. Yeah.
It is complicated, but it's going to be housed with a conservation agent. And the reason being is that there is kind of a natural synergy there that I know she's already complained to me, unfortunately, that she's going to have to do this, but the ball's bouncing around and we have no choice. I mean, I think to not make these changes and not participate in the flood insurance program would be much more risky, I would say, to not do that, to step out of it.
Okay, well, Rich, my feelings on this. It's hard enough dealing with the issues of conservation, and now you're going to add flood zones into it. You
already are in it, Susan.
You're going to really need to make sure that conservation can handle this load, as well as that the process is streamlined and fair.
Yeah, no, I know.
This is not something that conservation that meets once a month is set up to handle.
So just to clarify, so It's not conservation, though. It would be through the agent. So it'd be through the office. You wouldn't be going to the conservation. If you have to get a permit for the fence, as I said earlier here, or paving, that would be just internally. It'd be like applying for a building permit.
Okay.
There's no conservation commission involvement with that permit.
Okay. Because I know you and I discussed this offline, but Conservation Board as it stands is already not in compliance with Massachusetts law by only meeting once a month. So they're supposed to be meeting every 2 weeks. So we would not be able to put that additionally. So that's.
Yeah. So we wouldn't be putting it on top of the Conservation Commission.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I think the risk for the 35% of the town that is in a floodplain, whether or not we define it that way that we are currently, and I can tell you I'm one of them. Do I want to have to do another permit? No, but do I want to get denied, support and funding if I have a flood because we haven't participated in the program? Also, no, that would suck. So I think it's about how do we, talk about this with the town and kind of what the risks are of not doing it versus doing it. But I think it affects everyone, not just the 35% by the decision.
No, it does. I mean, it does. I think, so what I can do is I'll reach back out to Eric and just to confirm. So for example, let's say we have a storm that there's storm damage and we apply, like we actually applied several times. We had no winter storms where we applied for funding and we were reimbursed for our expenses resulting from the storm. If we don't do these and that money is not available to us, that's a significant cost burden onto the taxpayer because we have to respond to those conditions, flooding, trees down, et cetera. And I'll get back in touch with Eric just to confirm that. I believe that's the case. So they could withhold funding back. So we really don't want to. I don't think you want to be in a position. Wouldn't want to be in a position where we're not in the program and then we're arguing with FEMA after we've already spent out that money. So I'll double check with them to let you know.
Yeah,
sure.
just as a point, the last time we had a storm event that was under FEMA, the town received $160,000 of reimbursement for all the equipment and the time the DPW had to put in. So, I mean, that's a significant amount of money. Didn't go to the DPW, went to the general fund. I was a little disappointed, but what are you going to do?
I get it. So I understand that, but there are, Kristen, and for the rest, there are positive things because I think we do need to collectively work towards, getting development out of the floodplain over time. And if it is in a floodplain, to make sure it's done in a way that meets the standards, so minimize the damage that would occur. I mean, knock on wood, we've been pretty fortunate in Norfolk in terms of actually, flood damage compared to other communities, but we just don't know, especially with, as you saw, this has been quite a rainy summer. And the water levels are up pretty high around town. And so we just don't know. But the planning board, I'm presuming since they sponsor, they're going to vote to recommend it. Susan, your question's fair. I already thought ahead and I said to Eric, I'm trying to think what it was. There was a community that voted it down. And normally under Mass General Law, if you take a bylaw and you vote it down, you can't bring it back for 2 years unless there's significant changes to it. And we're kind of in a box, but that other community went back to town meeting and did adopt the changes to it. So I'll do a little bit more homework to kind of sharpen the pencil on the down. Well, I've already told you downside, but maybe a little bit more downside. And maybe that's the positive of adopting it.
So this is just because I don't have the warrant up since you're screen sharing. This is article what?
I think it was 11 I saw on one of the.
Okay. And And just for my note keeping purposes, so that when we're going back and we're discussing this, when it's time to vote, it's basically amending the floodplain bylaws
Correct.
to be in accordance, to be in compliance with federal law.
With the state of Massachusetts model floodplain bylaw.
Can I ask a couple questions?
Yes.
Absolutely.
Rich, have you talked to the conservation commissions themselves about this?
No, I
I
haven't.
mean, I know because partially, at least minimally, because you're amending a bylaw that has the words wetlands in it and striking those words. And I was on the Conservation Commission when we updated the maps the last time, and we were fairly heavily involved in that. And I understand that there's no changes to the maps, but I'm just curious.
I did not talk to them, just striking the word out. I just been.
Well, it's striking the word out, but it is jurisdictionally. I understand that you're putting it into the conservation agent's lap, but more importantly, the topic matter is something that they're interested and involved in. And I think jurisdictionally, a lot of the land that is under their jurisdiction is also in a floodplain. So,
yeah. So we're not in terms of, I could certainly speak. I haven't spoken to them about it. I mean, I certainly can. It doesn't change any of their jurisdiction.
I understand.
I
would hate to see someone from the Conservation Commission ask a question at town meeting about why they hadn't heard about it. That's basically the reason I'm bringing it up.
Yeah, I can actually, I'm going there. Well, I'm going there next Wednesday. I could add it to the agenda and talk to them about it.
Thank you.
The brief synopsis of that article, though, Rich, first of all, the description underneath Article 11 says bringing it into compliance with federal regulations, and you said with Massachusetts law. So I just want to make sure that we're framing it the right way.
I think it's fine. I mean, it's administered through so it's pushed down from the federal down to the state level, where the Department of Conservation and Recreation administers the program, and they promulgated it. I'll double check.
Okay. But just we didn't go through it all the way. A short version of what it's doing is it's requiring people who live, either people or developments that are going to be done into a flood zone in a floodplain, to have a different kind of permit applied for things that even wouldn't normally have a permit applied for them, is basically the gist of it. We just have to know we have to understand it in a way that we can break it down when we're writing our recommendations, so that we're not trying to quote a 16-page piece of paper, thing that you've given us. So we can't mention every single detail. So would you agree that that's a decent description of the overview of it? That it's changed, but we're becoming compliant with mass law and federal law, so that we can still be eligible for FEMA. But what it's requiring is that people and developments in floodplains will have to apply for permits that wouldn't necessarily have triggered permits in the past.
Yeah, I might just frame it just a little bit in terms of, a fence, a shed, drive, those. So it's, of course, you couldn't, in terms of, we didn't get through.
Basically, if you live in a floodplain, you have to have a permit to do anything, whereas you only have to have a permit for certain things if you don't live in the flood zone.
Yeah,
I think that sounds like an oversimplification, frankly, but
well, I know.
I'd be really interested in seeing the actual language, Rich. So
I mean, I understand it's an Jesus, I can't speak. It's overly simplified, but unfortunately, when we're writing up the synopsis, that's what we have to do. We can't put all of these things in the warrant, but at the same time,
that, but that's why Rich is at the meeting, because he'll give him more. Assuming whoever makes this recommendation is then going to flip it to Rich.
They are, except I'm talking about what's printed when we're writing up our recommendation. Rich isn't there when people are reading it at home.
No, yeah. Well, I could help with the write of it if you want, just to.
Okay.
We're not there yet.
Yeah, we haven't voted on it yet, but yes, that would be
vote against it.
I'm just trying to make notes so that when we do go back to vote, we're not having to refer to, a different document. That way we have it handy, because unfortunately I have to go through each warrant article at a time when we're calling for the vote, and people forget what the details of it were. And I'd like to be able to remind the board what we're voting on.
Sure.
It's probably worth a clarification too, that maybe 30% of the town of Norfolk is in a floodplain. Most of the floodplain is in conservation land or swampland already, and that it's very few dwellings. As I look at the map, very few dwellings are in a floodplain. So if we confuse people and say that 1 in 3 of us will be impacted by this, and we end up having the impact being that the folks who actually have their dwelling in a floodplain, like those on River Road, no longer get FEMA flood insurance because 30% of the people think they're impacted when it's really a small portion, will have to get a permit for changes to their structures. Like that would be a horrible mischaracterization of what's actually happening, with a very negative impact to a small portion of our town.
No, that's a very great point.
It would be great if when we go to town meeting, just in case there are any questions, we have, like Brian is saying, we have the actual number of, not percentage of the land of Norfolk, but the percentage of homes that are going to be affected.
Yeah, so I know
that's going to be a question that they'll ask. So thank you, Brian. That's a better way to characterize it, I guess, is the best word to use. So that's not really what I want to say, but
so I'm going to be calling Barry tomorrow. I know he's listening. So about, through the GIS, if potentially we can, take the floodplain overlay and then pull out, how many houses are actually within the floodplain to get a comparison between the total number of dwelling units in the town of Norfolk.
Yeah. I don't want to use this.
Yes, Rich, we can do that.
I don't want to use this word as if I'm saying that anyone in the town of Norfolk is dumb. But when we're doing these things, we really need to, quote, dumb it down a little bit. And I don't mean that in a negative way. So please don't anyone take it that way. But we can't go to the meetings where people who aren't on advisory, who aren't in zoning, who don't really pay attention to these types of things, and talk over their head with lingo that they don't understand. So that's what I'm trying to say. It's not about them not being smart. I just want to make that clear. I don't want anybody to think I was insulting anyone. So we have to have it in percentages, in numbers, with a map, and we have to say, if you live in A, it affects you. If you live in B, it doesn't, however you want to word it, whatever makes sense to you based on what it is. But we really need to have that information available. A lot of times we get stuck at town meeting not being able to answer it in a layman's terms kind of way, which ends up creating more questions. If we go at the article and we present the information in a way that everyone understands, with language that everyone understands, then it makes it a lot easier for it just to sort of sail through.
Susan, because of that, I think that's one of the best parts of what this advisory group does is translate the deep technical work that's happening at each of the boards into the words that are needed for the general folk. So I think in this case and maybe in some others, it may be good for us to take a longer approach to how we describe this article, as opposed to handing it over after a brief summary for a deep discussion from the board, the planning board. It may make more sense for us to do a more thorough summary of it to translate the technical work into what we know the average attendee will be able to consume in the 15 minutes that we have to discuss about the topic.
That would be great. I really think a lot of times it gets confusing at town meeting when the experts are speaking versus someone who can, I mean, I know I personally have gotten up a couple of times, not at the last meeting, but a couple of meetings ago, to just sort of take it a step back.
Recap. Yeah.
Like, okay, people, let me explain this in a way that, you know, that I understand it. You know, and so I think that's especially pertinent when it comes to zoning, because with zoning and stormwater and things like that, it can just sort of fly right over people's heads if they're not. I know I dealt with that with the B1 a lot, like needing to bring it down to a point where people could really grasp what we were saying. And I hope no one thinks I'm calling people dumb. That's not what it means. It just means that if you're not really up to date on what some of this language is, it's not as easy to understand. So,
yeah, and I think that, no, those are all good points. And especially in terms of, like, we don't want to go in necessarily saying, these are requirements that we do need to, you know, follow through. That's coming from actually from the federal government down to us. But so it's a little bit different than some zoning we deal with, where it's really, you have more choice, so to speak, right? You could say, hey, we don't like that idea, and we're going to vote it down.
yeah.
So the stakes are a little bit higher, so it's even not to get, so people can, I get it. That makes sense.
Okay. So we'll just make sure when we're assigning these articles that the person that takes over, that decides to volunteer to write up Article 11, understands what they're writing and is okay with giving a much longer, a little bit more detailed layman's terms explanation for it. So just remember that when we're assigning articles, everybody, that, you know, if you take Article 11 or Article 13, because they deal with things we have to approve, we don't have a choice in approving them, but we need to explain them in a way that the town really can grasp the importance of it, as well as how they will be affected. Okay. Does anyone have any questions for Rich on Article 13 specifically, which is the, applies to the getting us in compliance with federal law for the subdivisions, and then the one for stormwater, and then the one we just discussed. Does anyone have any questions on either the stormwater or the flood zone before we move on?
I do have a general question. I think I asked it earlier. I'm not sure I got an answer, or someone else asked it. Is the text of the bylaw going to be in the warrant?
It's not generally.
It's got to be something more than this, because this is a placeholder that doesn't make any sense.
That's why I was saying to Rick, he needs to make sure there's a handout at town meeting for everyone who attends that says, you know, instead of it saying included on the website, it needs to say included in the handout, labeled, you know, whatever. So that I'll make sure Blythe, Erica, can you make a note of that to make sure that Blythe knows that needs to be include the language of Article 13 needs to not say on the website for the day of the town meeting, it needs to say in the handout.
Yep.
Okay.
Let me ask you a question. So you mailing out the warrants, right, that you normally do? right? Is it you mailing out the warrants to all the households? Like,
No, for fall, we do a postcard. At least we have all of the past
I
few
Did-
years.
didn't we lose that ability at the last?
We have plans to have the warrant printed and mailed currently.
We do. We're not doing a postcard for fall town meeting.
I don't think
Correct.
we're allowed to anymore.
Thought we undid that decision. Yeah, didn't we?
At
No, we
fall
were the
town
ones-
meeting last year.
Are you sure? I thought we actually passed that rule.
I think they took it away from us.
It might have been that they only temporarily did it because of COVID, not because so
Well,
that people wouldn't
either
have
way.
to come pick up the warrant.
well, if you're, maybe you're not going to do this, but boy, it'd be nice to get that to the resident in the mail to see this as opposed to not seeing the whole text of this, but
No, we have plans to have it printed and sent to everyone.
okay. All right. That's,
I agree. I think if people get there and have to pick it up and look at like a 2-page document, they're going to be really angry and say, "We just got this today. I don't feel comfortable voting on this." And we've heard that before, and I think that's totally fair. So
yeah.
I think we need to have it out.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Well, that's good to hear. You want to go to the sign bylaws?
Yeah. So Article 12.
Yeah. So I'm fascinated to get your thoughts on this after I tell you what this is all about. The thought behind this is to allow for the town, just the town actually, not private businesses, to be able to install a message board. I'm sure you probably have gone around and see other towns that have, have a nice stone base. It's mounted, and it's not, instead of having the portable ones that DPW puts around, but to be able to have a message board that could say town meeting coming up, different town functions going on. So like when we had the celebration a couple weeks ago, to be able to have that message board in the center of the town, really on the thought was the hill. But, or I shouldn't say but, it would be the kind of the next level of it, which would essentially be an LCD screen where you could actually have images too. So, but this would be town stuff. This is not private stuff, be able to, people, the thought is to have it available so people driving through the center of town, about a, celebration, town meeting, different messages out there for people. So that's the thought behind it. And I'm also, it's good you're hearing about this today because somebody might be coming back to you to try to fund this if this gets approved. There's nothing. So this is really just to kind of put this in place zoning wise. There is no plan to do anything at this point, but the message board would be, linked back to town hall, that it could be changed. And so just another way to provide communication to residents. So that's really it. Curious.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm asking Susan, but
Yes, of course.
Rich, it's not clear to me, is it the intention to have these things permanently mounted someplace, or is it
No,
like
yeah.
mobile ones that we paid for last spring?
No.
Really public safety kind of oriented, but
No, these would be permanently mount. These would be permanent.
okay. So the follow-up question is why wouldn't we allow commercial entities to do this as well?
No, that's a great question. I love that question.
I mean, the reason we ban them is because they're distracting, they're disorienting, they're ugly, they don't fit the character of the community. Multiple choice out of those lists. But if we're going to let the town do it, why wouldn't we let a business do it? if you had to get a permit for it or something like that. I don't know.
Yeah. So the sign code for the town of Norfolk is very restrictive. So
Yes, I know.
Well, right? So
Yeah, it's probably unconstitutionally restrictive, but that's besides the point. So,
but it's not even so much. Yeah, I mean, not necessarily content per se, but just in how you go about having signage. It's you can't have internally illuminated. There's size restrictions, so forth. And so there are reasons for that to a degree, aesthetics and design and so forth. But I think that at least so this came by to me through the building commissioner that this was something that they've been, wanted to do for a while. And he thought that if you opened it up only to the town and it was demonstrated what it would be like, it would be a way to kind of test the concept to then consider for private businesses, as opposed to try to,
sure.
Bring it
Who
out.
enforces the sign bylaw again?
The zoning enforcement officer.
I thought it was who's the building commissioner, right?
Correct. Yeah. Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Because it's.
I'm just trying to point out the irony of that, where it came from. So I'm being a little bit obnoxious here. I apologize, but I don't understand why we would do this for the town and not for anyone else. I mean, if they're
be offended,
technologically, is it a relatively new technology? I'm not even sure I can visualize what this looks like, kind of thing. But
I think probably the best thing is if you go to a fast food restaurant now, they've not in Norfolk obviously because we don't allow it, but I'm sure you've seen LCD signs that are mounted where they have
the ones that change, like if I drive through the McDonald's drive-through, it changes from the breakfast menu to the lunch menu at 11 o'clock.
Yeah, exactly.
Why wouldn't we? Whatever.
No, I'm just.
That's my point, and I think that it seems sort of silly to make this change for the municipality to test it out, but that's just my opinion. So,
no, I understand. Not everybody's in the same place on some of these things, and so it's hard to, because I mean, I know like Dunkin' Donuts would love to be able to.
Yeah.
We've had discussions with them. They would love to put in the menu boards that everybody else has around, and they're great for the consumer, but. I mean, I hear what you're saying, for sure. I think, it would be in terms of, it would be mounted. The closest one I could think of, like, I drive by it, but like one of the schools over in Foxborough has like a rock, it's that one's an older one where it's really more like the digital display. But the idea would be on
is that the charter school? It's right on 140 there. Yeah, I drive by it. Yeah.
Yeah. And it would be, so where we're talking about on the hill, more likely would, be on a concrete base that would have field stone, so it would match the wall and stuff like that. And then it would be, it would be really around the perimeter of it, you would put the stone around and then it would be in there. It would be two-sided panel to be able to do it, so that's the vision, but that'd be awesome in a lot of ways, but that's also not very inexpensive either because there's quite a bit to do that. So, but as opposed to the message boards, I mean, I think so it's pretty not much to the change, but that's it.
Okay. Thank you.
So I have a question, maybe from the other side, which would be, why would we go from the town essentially not having a sign to changing the bylaw to allow them to have an internally illuminated sign when there's a clear path within zoning where they could have an externally illuminated sign, or maybe just a message board with removable letters? That would comply within existing zoning. Was that ever done? Is that deemed not meeting the needs? I don't quite understand.
Yeah, not putting up, a sign that. Oh, I think I don't know, it's a great question. I don't know. I'd have to find out to let you know if there was any thoughts of similar sign, except not complying with the bylaw, any attempts or not. I don't know. I don't have that answer for you.
I mean, I think we can all agree that having the construction signs out there permanently is a unsatisfying answer. But if there is something in the middle that allows us to stay in touch with our town while also complying with the bylaws and not making a single exception, that would seem feasible without making a zoning change.
Yeah, I think it was, part probably, well, the sign, the one, I will say, the one thing about not internally illuminated signs is they're challenging sometimes to read in terms of make sure you have the right material, the light's directed at it. Sometimes it can be hard to see, but that's not to say you couldn't do something.
You're talking about the sign when you're heading towards Patriot Place that says, get your vaccine, buckle up, game today. Is that the type of sign you're talking about?
Those are more like the signs we have now that are mobile.
Yeah.
Like the LCD or whatever. Yeah.
Susan, I mean, if you've driven through any fast food drive-through in the past few years, it's the one that you're looking at, basically. It's like
the McDonald's on 140 in Franklin.
Yeah, so it's got it's what McDonald's on 140? Oh, I missed that.
Is it on 140? East Central.
Yeah, so it's basically it's a picture essentially that comes from the inside of the sign.
Yeah, even if and it's really, you see them in the restaurants inside too. It's just that it's something that use it outside. So
let me just make sure I understand this. Just because I wasn't even thinking that until Brian made his point. What you're saying is that right now we allow for externally illuminated signs, which are the ones that, like we're talking about in Foxborough, where it says town meeting this weekend or whatever. But we want to have we want to allow a different type of sign.
Yeah, we allow signs like, on 1A, the Gulf gas station with the Dunkin' Donuts and Subway. That is a big sign, but it's not lit up. So they have to have the outside lights so you can see it at night. That's allowed. What's not allowed is to have
one. You're going to Patriot Place, and they're on every highway and they're above.
Yeah, those aren't what we're talking about. Those are.
I know they're not, but are those allowed right now?
No.
Those aren't allowed either.
Because those have internal illumination on them.
Yeah.
Okay.
Exactly.
But that's what the mobile public safety signs are, aren't they?
Yeah, but they don't fall under the definition of sign per the bylaw.
Okay. Thank you.
I swear, I hate to say this, but this right here is why people hate government. This is such a ridiculous, a debate over which type of illuminated sign we're allowed to have. Okay.
If I can, I would do you one better on that, Susan. And I'll give my comment on this. I would actually be in favor of voting against this. And the reason I would vote against this is a slap in the face to the business owners in town. And it's a slap in the face to all of us who've been hand-wringing for years about what can we do to encourage more businesses to come to town. The reason that the town wants an internally illuminated sign is because they want to present information in a compelling way. They want to be able to make it readable. They want to be able to change it, right? They want to be able to have some flexibility. They don't want a sandwich board with a piece of paper stapled to it because that's dumb. And we don't want a town crier standing in the middle of the rotary yelling at motorists as they drive by. But what we're essentially doing is we're saying it's okay for the town to want a modern day sign to deliver information to residents, but it's not okay for our business owners to do the same thing. So I think it's a slap in the face to all of these same conversations we've been having on what can we do to encourage businesses to come to the town, including all of that B1 zoning we just went through last year of kind of reconfiguring the entirety of town center in the hopes that businesses would move in. If we're not willing to allow an illuminated sign for helping encourage business and engaging with clients, on the principle, I would vote against this to allow the town to do it. My real direction would be we ought to strike the entire bylaw about this and allow, certainly put some level of restrictions in place. Your illuminated sign can't be over this many square footage. It can't be operating at 3 a.m. Whatever type of restrictions you want to put in around the operation of that sign, fine. I'm for that. But on the face, I think that this is anti-business, and I would say a disencouragement for business owners to come into town. So on that virtue, I would be opposed to this.
So I would
Sort of my point too.
So I think
That's kind of what I was trying to say. This is the kind of absurdity that people dislike about government. This right here.
No, I understand that. I think based on that comment would probably be a more appropriate thing to do.
So what you're saying is you're allowing, you want an exemption for the town, but not for anyone else.
Yeah. Now, if there's let's say this, if there's a different voice that the town of Norfolk wants to have regarding signage, which hopefully that's, at least I hear some of you this evening, there is that voice there, then I would think what would make sense to me is that the planning board, recommends IP it and we come back with sign changes that is not just for the town, but is also for businesses as well together, not just the town. And it's not one versus the other, and try to present the case to make those changes to the sign code that I think I do agree, businesses, they do want those signs, but the voice.
But here's the thing, in this article, the way you have it written, you put no stipulations on any of the type of sign that can be illuminated by the town, because in your opinion, you'll always, not yours personally, but the town's opinion, you'll always do the right thing. But you wouldn't just strike out the word municipality and have it say exemption to allow the use of internally illuminated signs for town announcements and business announcements. You wouldn't just strike that out and allow illuminated signs. You want to go back, and you'll only do it if you can put a bunch of regulations on it. But you didn't put any regulations in for the town. See what we're saying? Do you see what we mean by that?
Yeah, I just kind of want to be, I'm kind of carrying the pail on this one, so I don't want to. I'm not the author of this, so I hear your comments, and so what I'm constructively hearing is I would go back and say, why don't we come back with a package? I don't want to be. You've provided all constructive criticism, but I'm not really the champion of this. I'm carrying this forward for somebody else in a way to try to test the water. You've provided good feedback in terms of, I think there's an equity that needs to be done, and we can come back to you. I would come back with changes to the sign. There's other changes that need to be done. It's not just this, so I think that's the process is working in my mind right now. In terms of, you make a lot of, I agree, totally valid points. So
Rich, you said you're carrying the board position up. It sounds like this was
not the board. No, not the board either. As I mentioned earlier, the building commissioner was like, hey, let's he's like, why don't we try to do this and see if there's support, at least from the town residents, at least from the town side, and then maybe
So when it says submitted by the planning board, it is not submitted by the whole planning board?
No, so he asked, basically, he doesn't have the authority to submit a zoning bylaw.
Yeah, he does. He's a resident, right? You can do a citizen's petition if a citizen wants to do that.
Yeah, but he's an
employee.
so he wants to go through the process is what.
So this was submitted by Bob Bullock? Is that what you're saying? This was Bob's idea?
It originated with Bob. I talked to the planning board about sponsoring on his behalf to put it before town meeting to have this discussion. So that's the path that it took.
So the planning board doesn't hold a position for or against this?
They've sponsored to put it on. They haven't had the hearing yet, so I don't know. They at least were willing to sponsor it, to start the dialogue, to put it on the warrant, but they haven't weighed in whether to do it or not.
So I'm starting to, apologies. I'm starting to have a few reservations about our timeline with this, with all of this, with the exception of the budget with Blythe. It seems that every season we're having the same discussion where we have everyone come to us to present things to us, and yet the boards or the people responsible for them have yet to vote on them. And we're expected to wait till the last minute. And this happened just last spring, where you voted on something on Tuesday, the planning board voted on something on Tuesday night, and we voted on it on Wednesday night, and we had to keep pushing it and pushing our voting to the very last minute. Does anyone else remember this last spring, where we couldn't vote on something because the planning board was voting on it on Tuesday, and we met on Wednesday, voted on it, and then we had to submit our warrant article recommendations by Friday? Mm. I don't understand why, if the planning board meets year round, why they're always waiting and it's not just the planning board, so don't take offense to that, but you happen to be here in front of me right now, and it happens to have happened a couple of times now, where we're expected to discuss something and take a position on it, and yet the planning board or the zoning board or the whatever board has yet to actually vote on it or take a position on it. Am I the only one that's seeing an issue here?
I don't actually understand how they get submitted if it wasn't voted out of the board for consideration on the warrant. And maybe that's my not understanding how the warrant is created, but it seems like you shouldn't be able to put something on the warrant if it hasn't even, there's not even position on the board. So how do they submit something unless they take a vote that it's worthy of advancing forward to the town? It seems like we're wasting everyone's time by submitting.
Right. Yeah. That's what I'm saying about last spring. This just happened last spring. Someone's going to need to refresh my memory on what it was, because I have 50,000 things in my head since that day. But there was something where we literally had to wait until the night after planning board met on Tuesday. We had to meet the next night to vote on it. We kept pushing it down. It was a few warrant articles that we couldn't vote on because planning board hadn't done that yet. This can't possibly be the way it's supposed to happen. By the time you get to the advisory board and by the time it's on the warrant, it should have already been voted on by the planning board.
So let me start back from the beginning.
I don't think this is a conversation that we should be having with Rich. I think it's a conversation we should be having with Blythe and the select board. And I don't understand. I'm sorry, Rich, that you're been put in this position, especially since you don't seem to be a big fan of this sign bylaw to begin with. But I don't think it's a significantly different process than occurs on a regular basis, Susan. I just think that it's maybe the select board. I think a couple of years ago when the select board stepped back and went through the budget in a different approach, it may have changed this process to a little bit. 2 springs ago, when they weren't voting on, we kept pushing the meeting, but they weren't voting on the budget until they absolutely had to, which put us in an uncomfortable position. And I do think that that's changed everyone else's timelines since then, but I don't know if it's something we need to talk to the select board and the town moderator and Blythe about, because
that definitely does happen with Blythe, where, you know, a couple of times we could have gotten some voting out of the way, and she has said, oh, well, you can't because the select board hasn't approved the warrant yet. There is a timing issue with that for sure, but I'm speaking in this moment, and that definitely needs to be addressed with Blythe. But in this moment, I'm speaking directly to something from last spring that we had to keep pushing.
It was one of the planning board things. It was and then as well, this, like, if the planning board hasn't voted on it yet, why is it being presented?
So let me just kind of go back just a couple steps and just walk back to where we're at. So the planning board voted to sponsor these bylaws to be placed on the warrant. That was step one. This bylaw and the floodplain bylaw and the stormwater bylaw was submitted to the select board, which is that's the step. It goes to them to be placed on the warrant. And then from that point, the planning board holds their required public hearing on the bylaws, which is scheduled for next Tuesday night. The warrant closed September 1st. There was no time, unless they held a special meeting, to have a hearing in September before getting to this point. The only difference, I guess, with scheduling is if I was scheduled to appear before you next Wednesday night, that would have been after the public hearing, but I'm not. I'm here tonight. So that's, I mean, in one way is a scheduling issue to me.
So there's another path, though. The path would be you don't vote to put it on the warrant until you hear the pros and cons and determine that you would support it and it should move to the warrant. So you could say, well, we'll hold a hearing on it, but since the warrant's closed, it'll have to be at the spring meeting and on the spring warrant. Like, that is a reasonable thing for someone to say.
The only problem with that is that you are limited. You only have 6 months. So so if we had a hearing today, you've got to have a hearing within a town meeting within 6 months. Otherwise, you have to start all over again. The statute requires, that once you have a public hearing on the zoning bylaw change under Mass General Law, you have to have that town meeting within 6 months. If you don't, then you have to have another public hearing.
Right. But we know when those are, so we can schedule them appropriately. So
I think what he's trying to say is, okay, so you don't have time to get it on the fall, so have the public hearing in January, put it on the spring warrant. But I think what we're trying to say is if they knew they wanted this on the fall meeting, then they should have had this public hearing in June or July. You can't have, our hands as an advisory board are tied because we have to vote 19 days, 18 days before town meeting or something ridiculous. I don't know, whatever the number is. We take town meeting, we backtrack from when the warrant needs to be printed with our recommendations. It was tonight or next week, and then we vote. That's it. That's all the time we have. We don't have a ton of time. We aren't given a ton of time from when the warrant is published or created and when we need to vote if we want to have a question and answer session with people on the board or for the articles that are being presented. And so when this kind of stuff happens, where we don't have all the answers in the meeting in which we're having just so we can answer questions, it puts us behind. So now how are we going to get all of the answers if we still need to wait to see what the planning board is going to do? I think that there needs to just be a different process. We need to discuss it with Blythe, but also with the planning board. Because again, like I was saying, this isn't the first time this has happened with specifically the planning board. The planning board needs to not put things on the warrant until they voted on them. Because once they're on the warrant, we want to then interview and, ask questions. And we can't do that if you don't have your answers yet. It's one thing when we're talking about transfers of money that we can't vote on until the day of because of logistically how that has to work, right? With the fiscal year. But the stuff for the planning board, the stuff for the zoning board, things like that, that's not the case. It's not a legality of a timing issue. It's hey, let's put this on the warrant, but we don't actually have time to have all of our meetings and public hearings and get everything done before the advisory board needs to meet. And then you do it anyway. And then we're left holding the bag, not having all the questions, but needing to vote on it and make a recommendation to the town. So I can't speak for anyone else on the board, but it would frustrate me to have to vote on this tonight without all of the information. So thankfully we're not having to vote on it tonight. But I would give that feedback to the planning board. Does anyone else have anything?
Well, I think it's not just the planning board. Then I think if you're going to really kind of want to establish a policy, then it should come from the select board and the town administrator as well to say, look, if we're gonna do the zoning and so forth, then you're gonna want them to hold a public hearing, like you just suggested, in the summer, for a town meeting that's going to be in November.
Yep.
So that that means we have to make sure that we have a set date in November, and then the effect of that just is that we need to be 6 months back. So 6 months back. So we're into May. So
I don't necessarily think it needs to be 6 months back. I think that's a little bit of a stretch. But this closed on September 1st, so that means you had August, July, and June to hold a public hearing, right? So because the warrant closed on September 1st, you would have voted on it in your September meeting. You would have had the public hearing, the month before. So by the time we got to this point, we would have known what the feedback was from the public hearing, and we would have known what the planning board's decision was based on the public hearing. I think that's all we're saying. It doesn't need to be 6 months earlier. It just needs to be in a timely manner that you've had your public hearing and you voted on it prior to bringing it to the advisory board. I think it's just a little bit backwards. Like maybe it doesn't go on the warrant until you've had your public hearing, instead of the way it is right now. You guys, and everyone does it. I'm not just calling out the planning board. You just happen to be here. So I apologize for that. You put it on the warrant and then you host your public meeting. It should be the opposite. You should host your public meeting, and then once you get the feedback from that, write it up in the way that came with the feedback from the public meeting and put it on the warrant at that point. I understand what you're saying. It needs to be across the board. So I will speak to Blythe about it. I'll send her an email when she's back from vacation next week, and speak to Kevin as well. Sometimes he's on the call. Is he here tonight?
He has his hand up.
Yeah.
Hey, Susan, I'm here. I'm not on video, so I apologize for that. But very quickly, I think that you guys have identified a definitive opportunity to maybe make this process a little bit more seamless and to adjust the sequence to ensure that everybody's able to do what they need to do as we lead up to town meeting. I do know that the last 3 town meetings we've executed have been a little unique in nature, whereas we've been dependent on state budget voting, or we've been dependent on direction from other organizations within the state to be able to move forward from the boards and committees. That being said, it doesn't mean that there isn't an area that we can improve and take another look at this whole process. I think this has been a problem for longer than the last few town meetings. I think that this is something that was just understood as the normal process that goes along with this whole thing. But I do think that there is value in getting together with Blythe and discussing ways that we can do this better moving forward. That being said, I don't know if we could necessarily hash that out right now. So I think taking it offline and talking through it would be a great way to go moving forward.
Yeah, I agree. There's nothing we can do about it now, but I would like to not revisit this exact same scenario and process in the spring. I would like for it to run more streamlined in the spring, which is by the time we set up to have, our meetings with guests who are here to answer questions, they are actually able to answer the questions because they have all of their information as well. I think that's, a very important point that needs to be made. All right. Sorry, Rich, for making you feel like we're throwing you under the bus. It's not you. And I apologize for that. It's just, it's frustrating when we don't have everything the way we need it. And we only get 3 meetings. I mean, we literally only have 3 meetings this year for question and answers. So it's a little bit.
Yeah. So I think, just in terms of, if you're going to do that, we probably want to move fairly quickly because there's some things that zoning wise, it was talking about doing the recodification, and we may not be able to do that in the spring based on potentially what we're talking about right now. Just so I'm glad you're bringing it up right now because we might have to hold off. I don't have all the details for you right now, but we need to kind of get on that.
I'll speak to Blythe about it next week when she's back. Does anyone have any questions on Article 12 as far as the sign? Is there any, I shouldn't say it that way. I know that based on what Brian said and Jonathan said, and even to a certain extent, David, though I hate to speak for you, David, I apologize. It seems like they are not happy with the allowing the signs for the town, but not for businesses. Is there anyone who disagrees with that before I speak for the whole board? Hello? No? Okay. So then it sounds like based on the portion of the board that was vocal about it, it sounds like what we'd like for you to go back to the planning board with is, it's not that we have an issue with allowing the LED sign. We have an issue with allowing it for the town only and not for businesses. If you're going to allow them, then allow them. If you're not going to allow them, don't allow them. I think that's the gist of it, correct? If there's anyone who feels differently, feel free to speak up because I can't see anyone because we're still screen sharing. So,
So then let me ask a question. I think based on that feedback, I mean, it's possible the planning board, could we just vote the IP and it doesn't even appear on the fall warrant then?
Correct. You can do that. You can say the planning board is we're not the be all end all. The planning board is welcome to say, we're going to push it through anyway and put it before the town and let the town make a decision. It's just that it doesn't come, it might not come, I shouldn't say it won't, it might not come with an advisory board recommendation. It might come with an advisory board recommendation to vote no. So it's up to the planning board of whether or not they want to pull it, IP it, change it, wait, however they want to do it. And of course, like I said, they can just decide they don't care what the advisory board says and push it through anyway. That's always an option. So, but it sounds like at least for half of the board, I shouldn't speak for the whole board because not everybody spoke up, but at least for half, it sounds like it's out of an abundance of fairness. There's a chance they would vote no on its face.
Well, I also, just to speak up, I also have problems with, I want expanded signage. So that's not the only reason why I don't.
I'm sorry, you were breaking up. Can you say that one more time?
I'm not in favor for a different reason. I don't want expanded signage.
Okay, great. But either way, it sounds like it might not pass in its current form. We haven't had a chance to discuss passage of it in a different form, but as of right now, it sounds like it wouldn't pass the way it's written.
I would not pass it the way it's currently written.
So, I mean, technically we're not voting on it tonight, so you can't go back and tell the planning board that we voted on it, but you can certainly give the feedback that it looked like it would be leaning that way, of not passing. And there's no guarantee it will pass if they change it. I'm not saying it would. I'm simply saying that it doesn't look like it's going to pass the way it is.
No, I hear what's being said, and honestly, in terms of effort towards trying to get something accomplished, the floodplain bylaw and the stormwater are pressing hard. If I'm going to focus my energy on anything, that's where it's going to be. It's not on this. Like I said to you, I mean, I was really trying to be a good team player, so to speak, on this one. It's not something that I'm champion. So,
Okay.
Enough said for me.
All right. Is there, I can't scroll, but are there any other articles on the warrant that you were discussing?
No, there wasn't.
Okay, so the only things we have left, we did all of the select board stuff with Blythe. So the only one we have left are the CPC articles, right? We've discussed everything else.
Oh, you know what? I don't know if you, the roads are on there. I don't know if you want me the street acceptances. I don't know if you.
Yeah, it is on our agenda. Is there anything to say about them?
In terms of about the process again, but the select board.
Are either of these roads, are there any issues the way we had the issue with Meeting House last year? Or are they just general, normal road acceptances?
These are normal road acceptances where the developers finish the project and they're petitioning to have them accepted as townways. So there isn't, in terms of the only reason why we might not do it, if a couple of things, there are a few items left to be done construction wise, which is placement of the bounds, that kind of thing, might decide not to do it if it's not done by town meeting, but everything else, functionally everything else is done.
Okay.
And there's the as-built plans, we'll be getting the deed. So there is, it's not this is a typical, what we would want to have road acceptance one, these two.
And this is not unusual for us to have some of the road acceptances have to wait until like the day before. So that this is not something that's completely unusual, just to wait for the few remaining items.
Yeah. Yeah, like I said, if you want to, if is this another area you want to change, then we can just, I'll push it right back through the whole entire process to say, look, so everybody knows what the expectation is and we can plan accordingly.
Does anyone have any questions on this that Rich can answer? No? Okay. All right. I guess unless Blythe comes with additional information for us, we'll vote on this normally, like we would any other street acceptance. It's okay.
All right. Well,
Erica, is that it on the article, on the warrant for Rich?
Yep, I believe it was just 8, 11, 12, 13 for Rich.
Okay. Is that all that we had on the agenda tonight besides the meeting minutes?
Yep.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Rich. Does anyone have any questions on anything for Rich before we excuse him?
Thank you, Rich.
thank you.
Okay.
Thanks, Rich.
All right. So it sounds like we need a few things answered before we can vote on some of these things. Not next week, but the week after. Next week's meeting, I'm guessing, will be fairly short because Erica, it's just CPC, right?
As of right now, just CPC.
So maybe I'll ask Blythe to attend that meeting. We'll do CPC first, and then we can have a conversation with Blythe about how we are expected to vote on some of these things without all of the information. So I'll see. She usually attends no matter what if she's in town. So I'm assuming she'll be here anyway. So maybe we'll have a quick discussion with her while, instead of me just having it one-on-one offline, we can have it with her, with everybody, so we can get everyone's opinion. Since the CPC part would probably be fairly quick anyway. If not, Erica, make sure you update the agenda for next week's meeting to say CPC, any other business brought before the advisory board, and possible discussion of voting on warrant articles. Only because if we end up having the ability to go ahead and vote next week because the meeting is so short and we're ready, we want to make sure that's in the agenda as a possibility.
Okay. Yep.
We can't vote if it doesn't say that we might vote. And obviously the sooner we can vote on some things, the things that don't need a ton of discussion, then those people can go ahead and start writing their recommendations, which makes everything run a little bit smoother. All right. Does anybody else have anything else to say?
We need to vote on minutes.
No, I know. Anybody else? Anything other than that? Does anybody have anything? I know David needs to jump off in a few minutes. Let's go ahead and vote on the minutes. But one piece that I would like to discuss, and this is not directed at anyone, just make sure that if you aren't going to be at a meeting, you let me know so I don't hold the meeting. Because everybody is, sitting around waiting, and if I don't know you're coming or not coming. So you can let Erica know as well when she sends things out, or you can just let me know, the group, whatever. It doesn't really matter. We're not formal, but at the same time, I don't want to waste anyone's time while we wait. So just let me know if you're going to not be able to attend a meeting for any reason, so that we can move on without you here. All right. So Kristen, minutes.
Okay. Hopefully I do this correctly. So I reviewed the minutes that Erica generated from the meeting on September 8th. And I believe what I need to do is ask for, what do I ask for, David? Help me here.
You asked the board to adopt the minutes as drafted.
Okay.
Your final draft or the final draft for the date of the meeting. And then you have to do them separately, basically.
Okay. So I'm asking the board to adopt the minutes for the September 8th advisory board meeting.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay. Next meeting.
Yay.
Super simple. And then you have last week's meeting, or whichever one we're up to.
Last meeting's minutes I just got this morning, so I have not had a chance to review. I will have done that before our next meeting.
Great.
Okay. And we didn't have one on the 15th or the 22nd, correct?
Correct.
Okay. All right. So we'll do those next week. And then we just need to make sure that we have the last meeting's minutes done by town meeting so that we can vote on them at town meeting, so that we don't have to have a meeting, in December for no reason. So staying on task. So, all right. If there's nothing else, I'll take a motion to adjourn, and I'll see you all next week at 7.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
All right. Thanks, guys. See you later.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
On-site space allocated to member communities. So that was very interesting.